I'm delighted to welcome our final speaker for the session, Marta Bustillo from University College Dublin. And Marta's talk today is on the Digital Learning Librarian at UCD, a case study in social interoperability. Take it away, Marta. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, and also thank you, Michelle, because you've set the scene for what I want to talk about. So this talk is going to be a little bit about the Digital Learning Librarian role at UCD Library, but it's also going to be about reflecting on what's necessary to roll out initiatives from the library across an academic institution, and to think about how we engage all of the relevant stakeholders. So let me first, if I can go with that. There we go. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, a little bit about the role at UCD, but also a series of workshops that I attended in May 2021, organized by OCLC and LIBER. And I'll talk about that in a little while, and how then I applied the model explored in the workshops to the digital literacy initiative and the role at UCD. So let's just have a quick look at the job description. In the summer of 2021, UCD Library decided to advertise for a new role in the library, partly in response to all of the different things that happened during the pandemic, but also because there is, as Michelle mentioned, very clear evidence of the big gaps in digital literacy, both among students and sometimes among staff too. So the role required what I call functional expertise. What I mean by that is things that a library professional would know how to do relatively easily, especially if you've been a teaching librarian like myself. So they wanted the role to develop a digital learning framework for the library, and also a range of high quality, impactful, accessible digital library services. And I emphasize services because it wasn't just digital objects, electronic resources, but also workshops and other kinds of services to support digital literacy. But interestingly, there was a very meaningful aspect of relationship building to the role. The job description described collaboration with several different units in the library, with the library's cultural heritage collections, but also with academics and with other units across the university. Any unit across the university that was supporting the development of student digital literacy skills. So that takes me to the OCLC LIBER Social Interoperability workshops. That's a real mouthful. So I'm going to go for SI next. So this happened in May, before the role, the Digital Learning Librarian role was advertised, and they were supposed to be about how to promote open scholarship initiatives within academic institutions, within research institutions. And I'm going to, so the workshops were based on a report that OCLC had recently published. That's the report, and it was a research project, and there were 3 different workshops, which were all about understanding the social and structural norms that shape relationships between different units in academic institutions, and how you can plan to develop those relationships so that you can make your initiatives successful. And when I was appointed for the role, I realized that what I learned from the OCLC LIBER workshops was really applicable also to the Digital Learning Librarian role. So here are a few things that came up during the workshops that really jumped out at me. That was their kind of mantra. Universities are complex adaptive systems. What does that mean? They often display dynamic behavior, they have independent agents, sometimes units might even have conflicting goals. They have what the OCLC report called intelligent and learning agents. So people change, they develop and evolve. Many units have their own ways of organizing things, and very often there's no single point of control. Or, the way I translate all of that to myself is, units in a university are like little independent republics with their own government. And you have to take that into account if you want to roll out initiatives across the university. The other thing that came up in the report from OCLC was that the library is considered as a really trusted agent for sustainable services, so not just for short-term projects, but for anything that requires a level of sustainability. And that really comes into play with the Digital Learning Librarian role. So, that's an OCLC report infographic. And in that infographic, they had identified the key stakeholders for developing open scholarship initiatives in universities. But I'm using that center part as my Bible, basically. They say things like, secure buy-in from your stakeholders, know your audience, speak their language, try and find solutions to the problems they have, because then you'll get their support, and invest the energy. And that's very much what this whole project about the Digital Learning Librarian and the Digital Learning Initiative has been so far. So, this is how I took the learnings from the Liber OCLC workshop, and I tried to apply them to digital literacy at UCD. And I have to say that we are lucky in UCD because our strategy actually mentions digital literacy by name, which is kind of unusual. So you would think, oh great, it's in your strategy, so everybody must be striving for it. No, remember, universities are complex adaptive systems. And every unit will take that need for promoting digital literacy and interpret it in their own way to suit their own requirements and needs. But on the other hand, my managers were extremely far-seeing and forward-looking, and they realized that social interoperability was key to the successful implementation of the initiative. So they kind of embedded it within the role. They got the Digital Learning Librarian position, which is a 2-year position, to be partly funded by the UCD EDTL project, which is the Enhancing Digital Teaching and Learning project funded by the Irish Universities Association, which Michelle has mentioned a little bit about earlier. And that meant a number of things. So the UCD project is chaired by the Dean of Students, which means that the Digital Learning Librarian has the ear of the Dean of Students. That's very good, I can tell you that. It's also based in 2 UCD colleges, the College of Engineering and Architecture and the College of Science. And that means that from the off, I have almost privileged access to academic staff and members of the management team from those 2 colleges. I also have the 2 educational technologists who are part of the EDTL team at UCD, who provided an enormous amount of support for a number of things. I also have access to the student intern at UCD EDTL project, and also support from the wider EDTL team, which is based in the 7 Irish universities. So I have been really privileged to get advice and suggestions and ideas from people in UL and DCU and Maynooth and Galway and Cork and everywhere else, really experienced educational technologists who are also used to working with a library in some ways. And so I've benefited from their expertise. So if I try to apply that social interoperability model from the Liber OCLC workshops, this is a little bit what comes up. And I'm only focusing on the university itself. I'm not thinking about the wider landscape, national and internationally. So in UCD, all of these units, the library, IT services, the individual colleges and schools, the office of the registrar, because if you want to embed anything in the curriculum at program level, you need the buy-in of the registrar, the Teaching and Learning Center, the Writing Center, the Careers Network, Access and Lifelong Learning, the Students' Union. But one of the important things that the OCLC Liber workshops stressed was that it wasn't enough to identify who you need buying from and who your audience are. You need to do in-depth planning. You need to go through each of these units, understand how your initiative may impact what they're trying to do, try to see what they need that your initiative may be able to provide for them, and do a proper scoping of how do I go about getting buy-in from this particular unit about this initiative. So with help from UCD Library's outreach, CLL team, so the College Liaison Librarians team, the Research Services team, with help from the UCD EDTL team and their amazing educational technologists, with help from the educational services in the IT unit in UCD, with help from the career service, who have decided that because they want students to be prepared for the world of work, they are going to promote the digital literacy stuff that we are creating. And many other places. These are some of the things that have come up so far that we have created. So we now have a digital literacy framework. We have a module that is embedded in the VLE. And in fact, Unit 2 of that module has now been incorporated into the module that all students starting UCD have to do. The kind of UCD welcome module. We also have, of course, we do a digital literacy library guide, which is acting at the moment as a holding space for all the materials that are being created, and the OERs that I'm hoping to create, because I'm putting up the files for all the tutorials that we're creating. Only 3 so far, but there will be more. And hoping that anyone who is interested in downloading them, they can. And just a few final thoughts. So what has really worked very well? Obviously, the support and the connections provided by the UCD EDTL project team, but also by the wider EDTL project team, because a lot of the content and a lot of the suggestions that I've had for future things that we could be doing have come from the wider EDTL project team. The close collaboration with library colleagues, particularly the liaison librarians, the outreach team, who have been amazing. All of the graphics that you see for this presentation have come from our amazing outreach team. And then things like, the education and technology team at IT Services, and the contribution of our amazing student interns in the EDTL project. I have been working with an approach of students as partners in the creation of tutorials around digital footprint, digital well-being, digital identity, and that kind of thing. What hasn't worked so well, or the main challenges, are basically the things to do with how to identify who the key stakeholders are and how to get buy-in from them and try and roll things out in a wider way and not just from the library. And really, it's not so much that it hasn't worked so well, it's that it's a very long process. It's not something that you can do in a day. But there have been interesting developments. So for instance, I never thought that I was going to be working with the Careers Office until I realized that the Careers Office were trying to roll out a program where students could put together a portfolio of courses and skills that they have developed outside the main curriculum that they can then take with them as micro-credentials for when they go for interviews or whatever. And they were trying to promote this program, and I was trying to promote the digital literacy initiative. So I now, whenever I create a course, I say, this course is available for you to include in the Careers Office UCD Advantage Award. And so that means I'm promoting their service and they're promoting mine. And that's what I mean by understand your audience, see what their pinch points are, and try and offer something that will help them and will help you. So I suppose it's that difficult bit where you have to identify the working groups, the research initiatives, those kinds of things that happen in all different units in a university. And that's actually quite difficult to identify, but you really have to put in the work to do that. And when you do, things happen, and initiatives get rolled out, and people support what you're trying to do. So, some recommendations. Take a look at that OCLC report. I have included it as a reference in this presentation. And also, get your elevator pitch right. Learn to articulate in 30 seconds what your initiative is and how it's going to help that person that you're talking to. Offer solutions to other people's problems. And then finally, there's just no substitute for passion, energy, and commitment. And that's that.
Well, I think Marta summed it up really nicely there. Passion, energy and commitment has been hugely on display here with the projects that have been presented. I'd like to thank our panel and everyone who was involved in the projects and papers here. I'm delighted to say everyone has been a good Conul citizen, so we have some time for questions.